Hi, my name is Crystal Duquette, and I'm assuming the role of an economic advisor to Steve Forbes. I'll be highlighting the causes and responses of the Great Recession. So here's some overview of some of the topics that I'll be going over. Let's start out with what is a recession. A recession is a significant decline in the economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. A recession begins just after the economy reaches a peak of activity and ends as the economy reaches its trough. There are several contributing factors that result to the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. This will be discussed shortly and into more details. So some causes and effects stats. These are just some of the causes and effects to the Great Recession. I'll be going into more details. So some were deregulation in the financial industry. Banks were permitted to engage in hedge fund funding. They needed more demand for home mortgages and created interest-only loans affordable to subprime borrowers, which then led to, unfortunately, affecting foreclosures. So the rates of the foreclosures went up, GDP declined, it went into the negatives, which created unemployment due to the layoffs, or just some examples including stock market crash and oil prices increasing. And who were the people that got affected? People in general here in the U.S., especially homeowners, investors, retiring Americans, and anyone who purchased oil for, let's say, traveling reasons were affected. So factor number one that led to the Great Recession was change in mortgage lending standards. Prior to the recession, the federal government, HUD, and CRA set fiscal policy and regulations that made buying homes more possible for lower and moderate income households and those with weak credit scores. These folks were able to borrow more relative to their income, put down little to no payment to purchase a home. Many home mortgages were bought by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. For political reasons, the government gave sponsorship to these two businesses, and due to that gave a perception that they were backed by the government, when in fact they were privately owned for-profit businesses who served stockholders, Congress, and federal regulators. These two powerhouse businesses purchased 90% of the mortgages sold in the secondary market. This greed, corruption, short-lived high profits led to them in July 2008 to declare insolvent and was then taken over by the U.S. Treasury. As you can see in Exhibit 5, the type of loans that were offered to these folks were home subprime loans and Alt-A mortgages. And you can see that there is a decline in 2000, a rise in 2003 all the way to 2006, and then it led to the decline, which led to foreclosures from 2006 to 2007 on forward. These policies and regulations were highly not sustainable, and it was predictable where it was leading, and it did, resulting in substantially higher default and foreclosure rates. Factor number two, prolonged low interest rate policy of the federal government during 2002 to 2004. To keep the economy at a strong growth and with stability, the Fed kept its inflation rate low throughout 1985 and 1999. However, beginning in 1999, the Fed policy became erratic. Monetary policy was expansionary just before 2000. Restrictive prior to the recession of 2001, and then highly expansionary during the recovery from the recession. The Fed kept short-term interest rates at historic lows throughout 2002 through 2004. These historic low interest rates, prior to the increasing substantially during 2005 and 2006, during the Fed shifted to a more restrictive monetary policy, made ARM loans attractive as well because it opened the doors for home buyers to afford expensive homes at an affordable monthly payment. However, as the name implies, adjustable. When the housing market boomed and then busted, so did the interest rates, and those now homeowners were faced with higher monthly payments that they could not afford. They did not understand the risk of having this kind of loan and thought they were going to make riches, only be left walking away as they look back, as their loans exceeded the value of their homes. Factor number 3, the increased debt-to-capital ratio of investment banks. Financial banks and Wall Street greed played a role to its collapse, as investment banks were allowed to with a rule change adopted by the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2004 to increase their leverage ratio and capital from 12-1 to 60-1 when financing mortgages with AAA rated securities. However, the storm on foreclosure rates continued to thunder, and banks did not have enough capital to cover for those rainy days. Factor number 4, high debt-income ratio households. Debt-to-income ratio soared to an alarming 135%. The only way for homeowners to cover debt was to have more household income, because they were unable to refinance their homes during a time wealth was falling apart. Unemployment rose to 10%, and the U.S. GDP was in a negative. So what changes occurred for the U.S. economy? Actions were put in place to try and fix what occurred. New regulations and programs like TARP, ARRA, DFA, and HARP, for example, have been imposed on the financial industry and to get the economy expanding again. Mortgages were nationalized. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac was taken over by the federal government, which now the federal government oversees the mortgage market. However, even with new guidelines on mortgaging, some things have not changed. Relaxed lending policies still exist. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac still accept mortgages from borrowers with little to no down payment, and they continue to have access to funds at 7 to 7 points below funds available to private firms in the lending market. Tax policy and deducting on mortgage interest payments that helped fuel the housing boom is still encouraged today. So can a Great Recession occur again? History is known to repeat itself. It is part of a natural business cycle. However, lessons are learned and strategies can be put into effect to reduce or eliminate effects to a similar recession, even while the Federal Reserve continues its expansionary monetary policy. Businesses are known to have a natural business cycle that includes a recession after an expansionary peak and then its trough. Luckily, it always recovers. So what are some suggestions? To prevent the same domino effect from happening again, I suggest to always focus long-term effects over thinking short-term. Thinking short-term can have a long-term disastrous effects. With another recession currently going on, I highly suggest reviewing and cutting unnecessary government spending. This is still and will always be a debt that needs repaying to improve back our GDP, differentiating what is necessary and what is nice to have. With expansionary fiscal policy that will increase aggregate demand and grow the economy through lowering taxes that will improve and add incentives of buyers, lower unemployment, and also recover GDP is an option. Improve regulations that promote prudent banking practices. Always verify that consumers can afford being a new home owner. Both parties should always be ethical and honest and be able to report unethical behaviors. Calculate debt to income to be ideally 36 and below, with very few exceptions of higher. Home buyer education for first-time home buyers and pre-qualification education programs so consumers are more informed about how to buy a home, how to take care of a home, what you need for credit, and what counts for credit. Education is power. It lowers the risk of unknown and the not understanding the responsibilities of a home. Thank you for your time. And again, I'm Crystal Duque, and I hope you found this presentation informative.